Grab your rods and get ready. I'm Kel Kellogg, and it's time for This Week in Fishing. On This Week in Fishing, we'll be talking spring striper action, Norcal trout fishing, Golden Gate saltwater action. We'll explore an off-the-beaten-path fishing destination and a whole lot more. Once again this week, the striper bite in Valley Rivers is outstanding, and I've got Kevin Brock, a Fish Kevin Brock, on the line, and he's going to tell us all about the Valley bite this week, and he's also got some exciting news about an opportunity that's going to kick off towards the end of next week. How are you, Kevin? How are things going?
Hey, Cal, I'm doing great. Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate that. Yeah, we are excited that the striper bite has still just been rocking and rolling. You know, you got to fish with us last week. We were up in that Butte City area, and fishing's been fantastic up there, you know, by the pictures and all the fish we saw. But the warmer water and the dropping thing, you know, turned those fish off. They've moved down. We got a bunch of fish towards Calusa today. Got one about 16, 17-pound male.
Oh, wow. Nice fish.
But, yeah, it was just an incredible fish. We made sure it was a male, so how cool is that to see big fish like that?
Yeah.
And we also jumped in, got a few, you know, lots of keepers, things like that. You know, Lake Orville is starting to pop for the salmon troll. Well, like what you were talking about, you know, a key opportunity for this next week, they are going to be planting baby salmon at Boyd's Pump, you know, over on the Feather River.
Right.
They're going to dump them right there. They can dump a couple million fish, babies in there. Now, there's a bunch of stripers in there right now. We all know. Now, I don't agree with timing, okay? So don't, you know, I'm just the messenger here. Don't hate the messenger.
Right.
I don't agree with the timing. We're working on that, the best with the NorCal Guides and Sportsmen's Association, the best we can do to prolong it. But bottom line is they're going to dump them, okay? We got high water, so they'll get out. So in 3 years, we're going to get some more salmon. But as many stripers are in the river, it is going to be a slaughter for the fishermen. So if everybody goes to Boyd's Pump, throws little 3-inch swim baits, little tiny things, I make them. You can get them at fishkevinbrock.com on our store. Just a 3-inch swim bait and an all white, or even with a chartreuse tail, anything that looks like a little baby salmon. It will be whenever they dump those salmon in, you know, the stripers go on a bite and they eat everything. So it'll be good to knock some stripers out. People catch it, will protect a few salmon, and everybody will have some incredible fishing. So we're going to take a bad situation, we're going to make it good as we can, and we're going to be positive, and we're going to catch a bunch of fish.
That's awesome. That sounds very exciting. What after
that? That'll happen Wednesday, this coming Wednesday.
Okay.
Thursday, Friday, Saturday. It's going to be wide open, you know, for those 3 days. But Calusa is on fire right now. We're getting fish there. We're getting fish all the way down to Tisdale. Ward's boat ramp is still only open. The Calusa State Park boat ramp is open, and Steelhead Bar and Grill boat ramp is open. So you got 3 boat ramps in that area that you can still launch at, still get fish at, and some consistent nice fish. They bumped the river up yesterday 2 feet. We're going to get another solid 2 weeks of really good striper fishing, maybe even more. But tune in next week and we'll talk about that.
That was my next question. How long is it going to last? You told us. If people want to jump on your boat, Kevin, how can they get a hold of you?
You know, the best thing to do is we're so fortunate to have so many great clients and be able to fish so many people. But they can always jump on the website anytime at fishkevinbrock.com. Send us an email over there. I'll have Samantha or I'll check the office. We'll make sure you can get in. Call the 800 number. I've got someone in the office Monday through Friday from 8 to 4 every day. She'll answer your questions, your calls, and even if you don't want to book a trip, even if you just want information, hey, Kevin, where are you catching those fish at? Hey, are you getting them? I get stuff like that from people all the time. We're here to help people catch more fish, have a good time, and if you got to get out on a boat, hey, we'll take care of you too.
Well, that's awesome, Kevin, and I'm going to jump off now. You go get some rest. I know you've been going 7 days a week for a while now, and there's no end in sight. So we'll catch you next week, and thanks for giving us a call and giving us all that information.
Hey, you bet, Cal. Thanks for giving us the opportunity to be a part of your show. Thank you for who you are, what you do in the industry, and how you take care of our fisheries. And we thank everybody out there for just being the best humans they can be. So fish on, my friend.
All right, Kevin. Thanks, sir. Catch you later. So from what I understand, the West Delta striper bite is still rolling forward, and I have one of the best in the business that's going to break the bite down for us and tell us how long it might last. It's Captain David Hammond of Delta Pro Fishing, and he's going to tell us all about it. What's going on, David?
Hey, Cal, it's exciting. We had quite a winter of rain, and all that water really paid off. We got a little later start to our season, but man, it's incredible. And what's exciting now over this past week, we did get limits every day. Some days the fish are really moving around. I mean, there's fish in the bay, there's fish all the way up Yuba City, and there's fish in the middle. I don't see any end in sight. I think we'll probably be doing this all the way till the end of November. Last week, most of our fish came off the San Joaquin. It's a little cleaner than the Sacramento side, but I am hearing some reports from West Bank, from Decker Island, the Horseshoe, fish down in Broad Slough. But most of our time's been between Prisoner's Point and the Antioch Bridge. With this last week, boy, we had some nice quality fish show up. Fish all the way to 14 pounds. Mm-hmm. The reason I say I don't believe that it's close to being over is some of the fish haven't even spawned, and a few of the fish have spawned out, so it's really exciting.
Well, I'll tell you what, there's fish in San Francisco Bay that haven't spawned yet, and I think those fish are coming your way still. So they're down there feeding on anchovies in the South Bay. So I think you're exactly right. You got some really good fishing coming. How are you catching your fish?
Stripers are great. I mean, you can fish and catch them in all kinds of techniques. But what I really specialize in, and what I think is the best style of fishing for the stripers, is trolling them. We troll it to 5 guys, and we troll deep diving Yozuris and shallow running Yozuris. We run rattle traps. The Yozuri lure is just such a consistent lure. Yep. I have a couple of lures that have thousands of stripers on them.
Yeah.
You can pop off the shakers, land big fish, throw them back in the water. They run straight. So most of our fishing, all of our fishing for stripers is on trolling. So, and it's a great fishery to take kids out, women. I had a 100-year-old Dorothy on the boat last week, and a lot of older people. So there's a lot of action. The boat's moving. We're seeing fish on the screen. We have them clicker screaming. It's just my favorite style of fishing, the stripers.
I've fished with you. I've seen it in person. I got to actually deckhand with you a little bit one day. And I will say, David is a master troller. And before I got him on here live, we talked a little bit. And he told me there are still guys out there that aren't catching fish. Now, if you're not limiting out right now, you should be. And they're making some fundamental mistakes. So let's wrap up. Tell us what you're seeing in terms of guys making mistakes that is costing them fish or costing them not catching anything at all. What's their problem, David?
I would say number one, they're not reading their tides. It's just a basic thing. Any water with tides where the direction of the water changes, and even upriver where it rises and falls, it's critical that you know your tides. You can leave maybe like last week we were leaving in the dark. That gave us that bite window, that early bite window. These fish are going to feed at the ends of the tide, the slack tide, and the first push of the following tide.
Yep.
So I would say that's one of the critical mistakes I see guys making. The second one is they're not trolling these lures in the strike zone. These lures have to be, whether you're shallow running, those shallow runners need to be 6 to 8 feet. If you're running that deep diver, it needs to be 12 to 14 feet. Every second your lure is not in that zone, you're wasting your time. Now, there can be exceptions when they drop salmon smolter, if there's, birds working in their striper pushing them to the surface. But 99% of the time, you got to have that lure in the strike zone. And one more thing I would say is they're just not running those lures clean. I'm constantly, if you've ever been on my boat, and my clients can attest, I'm running around like a chicken with my head cut off. I'm snapping them lures, making sure everything's running straight, making sure that wormtail's in there. And it just, those little things over the course of the day, over the course of the season, really make a big difference in the final fish count.
Absolutely. And after you get off, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of those recipes for success. I know all the setbacks and about the weeds and all that. How do they get a hold of you, David? If they want to go out and catch some fish and learn a whole bunch real fast, how do they get on your boat?
Well, you can call me at 916-479-3492. You can visit my website at www.deltaprofishing.com. Also, you can follow me on Facebook at Delta Pro Fishing, and that kind of gives you the up-to-date. The nice thing with this technology is you really can see what's going on. Follow me there. Don't think that we're not fishing when you don't see posts. I don't really like to put too much extra information out there when we're booked, but it's a great way to see what's going on currently and to see if you might want to hop on.
Hey, even if you have your own boat, folks, I strongly encourage you to jump on Dave's boat for a day, and it's going to cut the learning curve down so much. Anyway, I'm going to say goodbye for now. I know you are waiting to go out to dinner with your wife, David. You have a great dinner, and I will catch you next time.
All right, Cal. Hey, I appreciate it. Thank you.
You bet, man. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Well, there you have it, guys. David is a master troller, and after this segment, I will go over very quickly some of those keys on how far back your lures are, your speeds, weeds, all that. Catch me after this break, and we'll talk a little bit of striper fishing in a Delta trolling style. Okay, I'm back. I just got off the phone with Captain David Hammond. Let's go over that striper tackle, and let's talk about trolling really quickly. First thing you need when you go out trolling, you need a rod with a sensitive tip, 7 to 8 feet long, and you need a line counter reel filled with 30 to 65 pound braid. This is my light trolling outfit. It's a Cousins graphite rod paired with a Abu Garcia line counter 5500 reel, and I've got that full of 30 pound braided line. The rod needs a sensitive tip. Let me show you the tip on this rod. I'm going to aim it right at the camera. Notice how sensitive that tip is. Hopefully you can see that. Why do I need a sensitive tip? The rod's going to be in a holder, and when the fish hit it, they're going to double that rod over. I'll tell you why. You need a sensitive tip because if that plug has weeds on it, the stripers are not going to hit it. So you watch the vibration on the rod tip. If it stops, you've got a weed. Reel the lure in and get it back in the water. You don't want to waste crucial fishing minutes with weeds on your lure. And the minutes are crucial. The fish may bite all day long. Typically, the best bites are at the beginning ends of the tides and at the slack water period. The time to go looking for fish is in the middle of the tide. You might have a 1 hour window where you can catch fish, so you've got to be ready. If you catch a fish, don't leave. Stay on that spot. Hit it a few more times. You may end up fishing a 100-yard stretch of bank for an hour, and you may catch fish the whole time. So once you find them, once you find biters, make sure there's not more biters there before moving on. Let's get into the terminal tackle, the end tackle. So here's how I've got this rigged. Probably the best thing to do is just to go like this. So I've got my braided line coming down to a swivel, but I have a bead on the braided line. That bead does nothing except collect weeds. That will save you from getting weeds on your lure a lot of times. So you want to use a good size bead, color doesn't matter, and then put a swivel on the end of your braid using a Palomar knot. Next is your mono leader. I use 25 pound tests. You could use 25, 30, 40, 50, doesn't matter. They're not line shy. You want a leader that's anywhere from 48 inches to 60 inches long, 4 to 5 feet long. On the business end, we have our deep running Yozuri, and I have that lure attached with a lock snap, not with a snap swivel. I don't have it knotted on the lure. I have a high quality lock snap. I can change lures very quickly that way if I want to change. You need two lures. You need deep running Yozuri crystal minnows, and you need shallow running Yozuri crystal minnows in the large size. And you want to tip them with the white worm. You want that worm on there nice and straight. See how straight that worm is? You want a 6 to 7 inch white worm. When guys tell me, oh, the fish are tearing my worms off, that happens sometimes. What will help that not to happen is to put a little crazy glue on the worm. If you're losing your worms, glue them on. Doesn't matter, won't scare the fish. Here are your setback and speed recipes for success. The deep runner. 12 to 15 feet of water. If you're marking fish in 20 feet of water, you're not going to catch them on this lure. 12 to 15 feet deep. Spool this lure back and keep testing for the bottom at 3 miles an hour. When you feel the lure dig the bottom, do 2 cranks of line and note the line counter. Depending on the distance back, you might be 91 feet from the boat. You might be 87 feet from the boat. But you've just determined the depth for that spot, okay? You want this lure within a foot of the bottom, and that's how you find the bottom when using a deep runner. Get your speed at 3 miles an hour, get the lure working until it digs the bottom, and then shorten up just a bit, and you'll be right where you want to be. The shallow running Yozuri, right here, this is for water that is from 6 to 8 feet deep. That's it. That's your range, okay? Your speed, 5 miles an hour, and your setback is typically 130 feet. Remember that. Shallow runner, 5 miles an hour, 130 feet back. Deep runner, 3 miles an hour. Determine the setback by feeling the plug, feeling for that bottom. When it hits the bottom, shorten up. You've got the correct depth. Final word. Whenever you're fishing these lures, you want a lip gripper on the boat. You might have a great net. That's all fine and dandy. You need a lip gripper. I get more pictures of people hooked in the springtime striper fishing than at any other time of the year. Stripers like to thrash around. Usually it's a shaker that hooks people. So what you want to do, you don't want them dancing around in the bottom of the boat with all these treble hooks on the lure. Get the fish in the net, then control the fish with the lip gripper, then start working on the hooks. Get the fish unhooked, either keep it or let it go or whatever you're going to do with it. But invest in a lip gripper, it's going to save you a trip to the emergency room. Beyond that, if you want to learn trolling tricks firsthand, take a trip with Captain David Hammond, and he'll put you on fish and he'll teach you a bunch. But anyway, those are the basics. Employ those and you should be catching limits right now. It's time for the This Week in Fishing NorCal Trout Report.
It's early May. We're here in the high Sierras. We got a trout on the stringer. We've been trolling for maybe 15 minutes or so. In terms of trout fishing, a lot of the high country stuff is still locked up in ice and snow. Lake Davis, for example, the ice is breaking up, but it's not gone yet. You know, it's flirting with freezing temperatures overnight. Even here at Sugar Pine Reservoir, driving in this morning, it was 33 degrees. But your mid-level stuff and your foothill stuff is really popping off. But what I would advise you doing here in early May is follow that access line, follow that snow line right up. When I can get to French Meadows, it's not quite open yet, I'll be up there. Today I'm here probably at about, 4,000 feet or so, and all these lakes, large and small at this elevation, are popping off. So if you have a favorite lake, I just saw a trout jump. If you have a favorite lake or a lake you've been wanting to try, Rollins, Sugar Pine, the list goes on and on. Get out there and get after them. This is a great time for hitting the smaller waters, and standard stuff works. Your Castmasters, your cripple lures, small Rapalas, threaded worms, the whole thing. The fish are hungry, the water temperatures are down, and that's kind of your mid-Sierra fishing report right now. If you have a lake that holds trout and you can get a watercraft in it or even fish off the banks, great time for bank fishing, get out there and get after them. The trout are hungry, they're feisty, and you're going to put some fish on the stringer, I guarantee it. So now is the time. We start hitting June. These lakes will continue to fish well. The fish are going to drop in the water column a little bit, probably as it gets warmer, but we're going to have a whole new array of lakes to fish. Your higher elevation stuff, your stuff between 5,000 and 6,000 feet, your French Meadows, your Hellhole, Davis, stuff like that. And of course, Eagle Lake is gonna open up here at the end of the month. So lots of options. And that's just not even to mention the trophy trout stuff at places like Shasta, Don Pedro, New Maloney's. Got a picture of a 5-pound brown out of New Maloney's just the other day. And Elminor. Elminor is a trophy trout factory. Doesn't fish easy, but it definitely kicks out some really nice fish. So anyway, I guess his final thought is you've got options aplenty. Get out the trout gear, get to those lakes, and tap in on the bounty of mid-spring.
Howdy, folks. We all know about the prominent fishing locations, you know, the Sacramento Delta, Lake Shasta, Eagle Lake, San Francisco Bay, stuff like that. But on this segment of This Week in Fishing, I want to share with you some of the smaller, off the beaten path locations where you can go, get out, have some fun, catch some fish, enjoy maybe a camping trip, and also maybe throw in some hiking or, you know, motorbiking or whatever. So let's kick off this segment with a discussion of Sugar Pine Reservoir. Sugar Pine is located in Tahoe National Forest. It's a place I've been fishing for years. The lake first filled in 1982. It's east of Forest Hill, California, and the lake is a water supply source for Forest Hill. When at full capacity, the lake features 165 surface acres. It has a nice boat ramp. It has a 10-mile-an-hour speed limit, and several campgrounds dot the surrounding area. In terms of fishing, it's heavily planted with rainbow trout in the spring, and there is some planting that takes place in the fall as well. There's a sleeper brown trout population in the lake. I've been fishing the lake for 20 plus years. I've never caught a brown there. A young man fishing it last winter caught a 12-pound brown, an absolute monster that I've seen pictures of. My buddy Olin Bycroft several years ago, he was fishing off the bank and he caught a 5 or 6-pound brown on an inflated worm. In terms of trout tactics, you know, all your standard trolling stuff works, you know, cripple lures, cast masters, threaded worms, grubs, anything you're going to go out and catch some, you know, pan size or better rainbow trout on, that's going to work for you. From the bank in the springtime when the water's still cold, all your standard stuff, power bait, inflated worms, salmon eggs, flies and bubbles, casting a cast master, all that stuff can pay off. The water is extremely clear most of the time, and because of that 10-mile-an-hour speed limit, it's a great place for kayakers, belly boaters, float tubers, I should say. Not to say that you couldn't bring a big boat there. You could definitely go up there with your big aluminum trout sled, but it's a small lake. 10-mile-an-hour speed limit makes it ideal for small boaters. There's a trail that goes all the way around the lake. I believe the trail's about 3.5 miles long. Lots of fishing access around that trail. Now, moving on beyond trout, the lake has a sleeper population of Florida strain largemouths, and for a lake that sits at 3,600 feet, that is very rare. I've never caught a really big one, but I've seen them swimming there. Actually, I've had them chase my trout up when I'm bank fishing. I've seen those fish well in excess of 10 pounds. So they're there, very little pressure on the bass population. When I've bass fished it, I've caught a lot of small largemouth, say up to 13, 14 inches, as well as plenty of smallmouths. To catch the smaller ones, I was using standard plastics, Senko's plastic worms, the usual fare. I suspect if you want to catch one of those big giant largemouths, your trout pattern swim baits is going to be the way to go. There's channel cats in the lake. Nobody really targets those. And there is a population of green sunfish, although they seem to be on the small side, about so big. I've caught a lot of them. I've never caught a big one, but they are a lot of fun on a fly rod. In the surrounding area, there's lots of opportunity to hike, and there's some extensive motorcycle trails, dirt bike trails, where you can run quads, dirt bikes, stuff like that. So, in a nutshell, if you've never been to Sugar Pine Reservoir up in the Tahoe National Forest, I think you should pay it a visit. You're going to have a great time. It's a beautiful area. The fishing's good, especially in the spring and fall. In the wintertime, if we have a good snowpack, there's snowmobiling, there's snowshoeing, all kinds of stuff like that. So anyway, it's just an area where you can get out, enjoy nature, catch a few fish, and have a good time. So if you haven't visited Sugar Pine Reservoir, check it out online, figure out how to get there, maybe spend a weekend or an overnight trip there, do a little bit of camping. Anyway, that's our destination for this week. Thanks a lot, folks.
Coming up next, we'll be talking NorCal saltwater fishing.
All right, so we're out here on the Pacific Dream on a beautiful Friday afternoon, coming back from first trip out to the islands on this new killer setup you got here, Chris. How do you think it went today?
I think it went really well, you know. We had cold water, so the bite was a little bit tough. You had to work for your fish, but guys that did, it paid off big dividends, you know. Gentleman behind me here, Chris, said you had three lingcod today, and plus he had better than a limit of rockfish he was able to share with a couple of people that didn't do so good, that were maybe not feeling so great. But for the first trip, I couldn't have asked for anything better. Found out that the boat handles like literally like a dream. No pun intended. It's a Pacific dream.
So next week, what's your plan? You gonna come out here some more, or are you guys gonna hang out in the bay, or what can we look forward to next week?
You know, a lot of it just depends on the demand, you know. I'm thinking that we're gonna keep scheduling some rockfish lingcod trips, maybe at least offer once a week, and we plan on beating up the bay quite a bit over the next month, and we finally got live bait, and this year especially, I believe that we're going to see the biggest overall numbers in halibut and striped bass, so pretty excited about it actually.
Hey guys, Wes Ward here from This Week in Fishing. Listen, I'm usually on the other side of the camera, so you don't get to see me on this side too much, but I wanted to take a second while I had one to talk about the gear I use when I go out on the charter boats in either the Farallones or up the coast for specifically lingcod and rockcod. You know, I just got back from a trip. I was out with Captain Chris Smith on his brand new boat. We had a great time. But I wanted to take a second to talk about what I take on the boat, because it's not traditional, honestly. My background in lingcod fishing, which I've been doing a long time, started in a kayak. And the gear we choose to use in the kayak is quite a bit different than kind of your standard fare that you would see on the boat. So I just want to take a quick second to go over it. When you're kayak fishing, big heavy rods and heavy gear definitely work, but I like to downsize. I typically fish a lot lighter than the people around me on the boat. If they're using 10, 12, 16 ounce weights, I might be 5. And so what I take with me is minimal, and it's effective in the right conditions, but I pack light and I take really light gear by traditional standards. So let's go over really quick kind of what we're talking about. I carry 2 rods on the boat. My first one is my traditional heavy setup. Now this is a lot lighter than a boat rod you're gonna see on the boat. This is an 8-foot Cousins rod. I do have a fairly large spool reel. It's a Penn Rival that's on here, pretty inexpensive reel, great for lingcod fishing. It has a great drag and you can get a mile of line on it. I run 65-pound braid. All my lingcod setups, I run 65-pound braid. This rod will allow me to fish the heavy gear if we're really deep, like we were here on the last trip. It also allows me to fish more traditional gear. If I wanted to do like a bait rig, I could do that. Typically I don't though, but this is kind of my heavy rig, even though it's much lighter than what you would traditionally see out there. And again, it's an 8-foot rod with a fairly large Penn offshore style reel. So my number 2 rod, kind of my go-to, the one that people laugh at me when I walk on the boat with, is a much more traditional kind of bass rod. In fact, this is my topwater striper rod. This is a 7.6 Cousins rod. It's rated from 1/2 ounce to 2 ounces, so it's a much lighter rod than you typically see on the ocean. I use a Lew's speed spool reel. It's a 6.8 to 1, much higher gear ratio than the Penn reel has. Right off the shelf bass reel. The only thing I change on these is I do swap out the spool for a deeper spool, and that's important because you want to be able to maximize your line capacity. The stock reel is not going to get you down where you need to get, so this one does have a much deeper spool on it, so that allows me to run more line. Again, it's 65-pound braid. This is my favorite setup for fishing rockcod and lingcod, and it seems light. I've landed really big fish on it. This is the same fish that I've won jackpots on, much to Cal's dismay, unfortunately, when he's fishing next to me, watching me fish my little sissy stick and catching fish. But it works, and I really like it. So let me go over really quick kind of my basic lure setup. I basically carry 3 different pieces of gear to fish with. It's all jigging, and my goal is to get away from the boat. I typically fish off the stern of the boat where I can flip it out and let out a lot more line. I'm fishing a lot lighter, so everyone else is straight down and I'm way behind the boat. And there's good and bad to that. Some guys say, well, you're out of the feeding zone. That might be the case. I've never had a problem catching fish. So my number one go-to is a really light Shimano jig. This is the new version. I think it's the Lucanus version. This is a 100 gram. I think that equates to about 3 ounces, 3.5 ounces. It has one little tiny hook on it. And you can see that the weight, this big spinny part up here, is loose on a piece of thick braid in there. And when this thing falls, it flutters. It floats down really slowly. You have to have a lot of patience fishing this, especially if you're fishing deep with a 3.5 ounce weight. It'll get you down though, and it'll get down to the bottom. Once it does get on the bottom, I'll just let the boat drag it along, just barely twitching it. Very similar to jig fishing if you were out bass fishing with a light jig or a football jig. I'm catching rocks, pop it out of the rocks, let it fall, let the line get tightened up, jig it again. I'm constantly letting line out on the spool to keep it on the bottom as the boat moves away from it. Deadly effective though. If we're fishing deeper than I'd say 100, 125 feet, I will step up to the next size up, which is a 5.5 ounce of exactly the same thing. It's exactly the same jig. It has a little bit bigger hook and a lot more weight in it. And this is what I had tied on the other day. This worked pretty well for me. If you're fishing at the very limits of the depths and the current's ripping, sometimes you just can't get to the bottom with the lighter jig. If that's the case, I have two main go-tos. I always carry these guys. This is just a big piece of lead. This one happens to have one of the cool jig skins on it. It looks like a rainbow trout. I don't know if there's any rainbow trout in the ocean. I haven't seen any, but the fish don't seem to care. And then my second option, which I fish a lot, is just a standard hex bar. This is the 5 ounce, or I think it's 5.5 ounce. These things are not very expensive. I usually have 3 or 4 of these on me. I tend to lose a lot more of these. They're not near as resistant to getting stuck on the bottom as the Shimano jig is, but this is also a go-to. You can see when it falls, it just has a ton of flash. And again, this guy tends to flutter a little bit as it goes down. You'll catch small rockfish, big rockfish, small lingcod, and big lingcod. Pretty much anything down there will hit this. And then I always also have a few swim baits. This one's like the Scampi style. It's pretty large. I think it's about a 3.5 ounce head. If the lingcod bites red hot, this is great. The other problem that sometimes you have with the lighter gear is if there's a big school of rockfish suspended above the lings, they'll hit your gear long before it ever gets to the bottom where you want to be fishing for lingcods. If that's the case, then I'll switch over to the swim bait that's got a much bigger profile, and most of the time I can get down through the rockfish and just target the lings on the bottom. But that's it. Ultralight gear, almost bass gear. I would be willing to bet if you haven't been on a boat and been out in the ocean on a charter, you have the gear to do this right now in your arsenal. If you have a heavy bass rod or swim bait rod or something similar, grab that, rent a boat rod when you get out there. You can do the conventional stuff like they do on the big heavy one. But that's it. That's all I take. It's one Plano tackle box. It doesn't weigh a pound, or it doesn't weigh 20 pounds like a lot of the guys do that carry all the balls of lead to hang off of, you know, whatever they're dragging their rigs down there for live bait or with cut bait. And it works. It just flat out works. So next time you go out, lighten it up and see what happens. Give it a shot. I think you'll find the results are equal to what everybody else is doing, and you'll get way less tangles because you'll be a long way away from them.
Nice. Ooh. Oh, power dive. Oh, they are feisty.
On behalf of Lucy the Fishing Dog, Wes Ward, and the rest of the team, this is Kel Kellogg signing off. Please join us again next Thursday for another episode of This Week in Fishing.